Hello. Ya, Siti Busdalifah. Ya. ICSB, International Council Small Business. Ya. You have two account, Risan. You join the using two account. Yes, hello everyone.
Perfect. What I've done, because the power is actually out here, so I've opened up my windows. It's just natural light right now, but I don't have my double screens. So what I've done is I put my PowerPoint into the chat for today because I won't be able to go through it as I normally would.
Yeah, that's fine. I will do the brief introduction, then I will call you to speak. We understand, so we go by what is happening over there. So it's all right. I think we are good to make it start. We haven't got the remaining speakers. It's one already. So 109. So all our panelists, good afternoon and good evening, everyone. I welcome you all to 2022. Cheers, everyone. I thank you all for joining us today. I am Dr. KAFAYAT KEHINDE LAMIDI. I will be sharing my screen. So if you can see it from the side, I hope please. Yeah. I am Dr. KAFAYAT KEHINDE LAMIDI, the Executive Director of Gsaf Center for Entrepreneurship, Employability, and Leadership. I cordially welcome you all once again to CEEL2022 Conference. Our central theme for this year's Grand Global Entrepreneurship event is entitled Connected Entrepreneurial Hybrid. The concept hybrid entrepreneurship provides individuals with an alternative employment or additional employable careers, and mostly with a focus on passion connected with compassion. So by definition, hybrid entrepreneurship briefly provides individuals with alternative employment, like I said earlier on, and additional employable careers. So by hybrid entrepreneurs or hybrids, I'm referring to people like entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are some academics who engage in consulting or consultancy services or enterprise activities alongside their teaching and research roles. within the academic setting or education sector. Also, we have another group called the Compreneur. Compreneur, my own terminology, represents the community entrepreneurs, such as humanity communities or not-for-profit organizations. And also we have part-time self-employed people. This set of people are represented as hybrids or hybrid entrepreneurs. And the notion of hybrid entrepreneurs they tend to start a small business or an enterprise while retaining a paid job. The job specifically tends to provide them with a fixed monthly income, and as such, in most cases, their commitments in their business or businesses tend to be part-time. So practically, why do we have this conference? It's because of a common challenge. The challenge is associated with hybrid entrepreneurs reaching their milestones in the business gestation process, such as their first transaction, first employment as well, first deal, first contract, first grants, first profits, just name it all.
Sorry, process.
So now we have two main questions on floor for our global speakers and panelists this morning to battle with. And the first question on the table for us is, how can we attain, or how can we help the hybrid gestation process of their businesses? That's one. And secondly, how can they transform chaos, challenges, crises to chances for employment or expansion, as well as opportunities for attaining milestones in their business enterprise or even in any business enterprise? And as suggested, as well as going by our central team, which is Connected Entrepreneurial Hybrid, today we are going to be looking at all these questions with many other ones by exploring and connecting 9 strands of entrepreneurship concepts. First, we have collaborative entrepreneurship, we have corporate entrepreneurship. Among them, we also have ethical entrepreneurship, and we have social entrepreneurship, we have strategic entrepreneurship, we have resilient entrepreneurship, we have entrepreneurial finance, as well as the hybrid entrepreneurship itself and entrepreneurial leadership. So to explore these enterprise questions, we are delighted to have in the room with us today 10 global speakers as well as panelists who are voluntarily willing to share with us their wealth of knowledge, experience, and expertise as veteran consultants. We have them among us today, engaging educators in their respective fields, enduring entrepreneurs, and we have motivational mentors as well, and responsible and resilient leaders. So, allow me to call on SIGVALDASON all the way from Canada, despite all the challenges of storm issue. To have you, we are so lucky to have you despite all these challenges. And Corey today will be talking to us about resilience in entrepreneurship and leadership. He is the founder of Hope Performance Institute. Please, Corey, all floors now yours.
Thank you, Doctor. Well, I'm really honored to be here and to see it's an international event, and people getting up for 5 a.m. to be here. I'm just grateful for the opportunity to be here. With a topic about resilience, to come into this with adversity and a setback in losing power today and still being able to bounce back from that, I think is a very tangible example of resilience and how we've been able to adapt here. So what I've done, rather than going through the PowerPoint as I normally would as I'm speaking, I've put a PDF into the chat that you can download, and then you have a copy. And if you have a printer, you can print it off and take notes as we go along. I will make sure I let my contact information be known through the organizers. And if you want to reach out, also connect on LinkedIn. That's always open. I welcome that. So I'll go through a bit of an overview of the topic of resilience and why me. Why would I even be in a position to be honored to speak to all of you? I'll give you a top 10 list for building resiliency in entrepreneurship and leadership. And then I'd like us to have a bit of Q&A. And in that, right before that, I have kind of an action plan idea, because I think anytime we come to an event like this, it's important that we have at least one thing we're taking away and something that we're going to action, because a lot of times you get ideas, and ideas without doing anything, you know, is just wasted potential. And I don't want to see that for anyone. So if we get into the overview of the topic, if we look at the definition of resilience, there's two parts of this. And the first part is capacity. You know, when we talk about the definition of resilience, there's the capacity issue, where if we think of like a gas tank of how much resilience we have, as well as an ability, which is that active part. And that capacity a lot of times is referred to as that mental toughness. And the ability is that elasticity and agility we have, and our ability to bounce back from setbacks. And when we think about psychological resilience, it's that ability in our mental processes and behaviors that help us promote those strengths that we bring to the table, as well as protect us against the effects of different stressors. And the other thing about resilience is there's a lot of research. There's an article out of Harvard that came out in January of 2021 on the secret to building resilience, that talks about how resilience actually has a positive influence on increasing work satisfaction and engagement, overall well-being, and lowering depression levels. And part of this is, with resilience, we need that motivation to persist. And a huge part of motivation is when we have that meaning and purpose in what we do. And as entrepreneurs, and leaders, we need to know that what we're doing has a higher order purpose and experience meaningfulness, which gives us that extra drive to pursue in spite of challenges and obstacles, and to really get our head above the weeds and see the path forward. So on that, if you go to the context and why me slide, you know, we need to find purpose and meaning in, you know, the current weariness of this pandemic. You know, I think 2020, we're about 2 years into this, and 2020 was kind of that shock year. And, you know, it was different after 2021 with, I know during the holiday break a few weeks back, I noticed when I stopped that I was feeling a little worn and weary. And all my executive coaching clients and everyone else I've talked to said, yeah, they feel a little worn out by all of it. And we're just kind of sick of, you know, the pandemic and all of this. And I think now is the time to really think about 2022 with positive optimism as we move forward. And the need for resilience has been certainly exposed and heightened. And the interesting thing is, resilience is really built by overcoming setbacks, or, you know, getting through challenges and obstacles. And what's not breaking us actually builds us to a higher level of resilience. However, we've seen that for some, it is breaking them, and it has negative impact. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to do that. And, you know, a big part of that is really connecting with the purpose and meaningfulness in what you do. And if you look at that context and why me slide, I have a quote that I like to say, and I've just found to be true time and time again, whether it's the situation with COVID-19 or, you know, major tragedies like the loss of a loved one, where, you know, or the loss of a career, business or whatever, that sometimes setbacks are actually a setup for something else yet to come. And oftentimes it's better on the other end, not always, but it does interrupt and allows other things to open up where we might not have seen it. And, you know, on the topic of purpose and meaningfulness, we know there's research out there. A meta-analysis was done in the Psychosomatic Medicine Journal that found that with purpose, you can lower your mortality by 17%. You know, that's huge. So we know that there's so many tangible benefits here. So the question, why me? First, one thing you need to know is I've had this burning question in my life since the age of about 10. And it's, can average people from average circumstance achieve elite level performance? Whether that's in sport, becoming a professional in sport, or, you know, achieving, you know, the top in their field in academia, or being a very successful business. And it's driven me in my research interest. I have a business and leadership background. I started my first business when I was 10, and I can say it was a legitimate business because by the age of 12, I had 10 employees. So I'm an entrepreneur by heart. And even though I have the academic background, I call myself a academic. And I want to bridge that gap that I think exists a lot of times. And also having the privilege to do a lot of executive coaching and consulting, I see and hear from a lot of and insights to bring this. And as we've experienced this morning, or at least I've experienced with, you know, major storm taking down power, we're all need to be resilient from time to time. And so what I'd like to do is quickly get into the top 10 list for building resilience. And then I want to make sure I leave time for, you know, Q&A. So the number one, becoming an unstoppable force. What I mean by this is where purpose and meaning comes in. And when we go into entrepreneurship or leadership, if we connect to that higher purpose and meaning in the work we do, that's when our work becomes a calling and we're really pulled and drawn in. And that gives us that extra oomph we need when faced with setbacks and challenges. And part of that is also sharing with team and others that inspiring vision that's aligned to our values. And when we do that, that allows us to, one, give inspiration, but also show expectations in that around the values. You know, the second tip is just do it. Resilience is really an active process and needs focus. And the do, the DO, stands for dispositional optimism. I think when we face challenges, obstacles, or setbacks, it's very easy to talk about the problem and just kind of wallow in it. And at that point, we have a choice, because whether it's a success or a setback, it's all learning and it's all useful. And there's something we can draw out, like even in tragedy, we find that it has a usefulness. It can hone what's important to us and priorities. It can give us a new inspiration for change. If we think of the greatest leaders and change people in the history of the world, it was typically something adverse that happened that inspired them to a level that they wanted to change the world. And when we tap into that, we can do bigger and bigger things with confidence. Number 3 is embrace your sage and be a superhero. This is tied to the work of Dr. Shirzad at Stanford on positive intelligence, and it's embracing your sage brain versus your saboteur. We all have some limiting beliefs, and also Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset, the growth and fixed mindset is important here. So trying to lean into those positive aspects and looking for the learning in things. And then as an entrepreneur and as a leader, the being a superhero is the hero part, HERO, is actually an acronym for hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism. So we should be helping build hope, which is that future orientation, optimism for people that the future and things will get better. With that, people should be developing greater resilience if there's hope, because when we lose hope or we lose that belief in something better, it's a little tough to take and persevere. Number 4, carry a mirror on your journey. Here, you want to reflect on the experience and look for what's useful. Even if you're upset or ticked off about something, what can you learn to then inspire you to take action? I also think that the fact that we're all here right now and doing something like this, we all have to give ourselves credit because we've gotten through a lot. You know, at this stage of all of our lives, if you're over the age of 20, you know, you can give yourself a pat on the back, regardless of your state in life. And I'll talk more about that a little later. Head to toe, you gotta know. This is about understanding your physiologies and ways to build your physical and mental well-being. You know, there's a lot of research and science out there on mindfulness and, you know, different practices. I think part of what we've seen through the pandemic and isolation is people are not, you know, isolating, but through that, we just aren't getting outside and getting fresh air and out of the building as much. And I think part of building resilience is being able to get out in nature and, you know, connect with breath and everything as well. And, you know, there's a 25-3 rule that 20 minutes you should be in nature 3 times a week, 5 hours a week you should be in semi-wild nature. So if you were in New York, you know, semi-wild nature might be going to Central Park. And then, you know, sorry, how long was I down for?
A few minutes.
Oh, poop. I was talking about the top 10 list for building resilience. So where did I go out? Did I get to any of that?
Just 2 minutes back, that's all.
Okay. did everyone hear what I said about unstoppable force and the connecting to meaning and purpose?
You can take it from there, Corey, please.
Pardon?
Take it from there.
Okay, so in the top 10, the becoming an unstoppable force is about bringing that purpose and meaningfulness in our work. Because when we connect to that, that's when our work goes from work to being a calling. And, you know, having that inspiring vision, not just for ourselves, but for those in the team we lead, and it aligns to, you know, our value. And if you think of the greatest leaders in history, you know, that literally have changed the course of the world, whether it's the Mother Teresa's, Nelson Mandela's, or the different religious figures, they were drawn by a purpose and meaning beyond themselves that was inspiring for a lot of others, that helped change the world, and realize that we all change the world. And you know, I used to give this analogy of we're all like a drop in the ocean, and we create this ripple effect. If you drop, you know, a drop of water into, you know, a drop of water into water creates a ripple, and we have this ripple of impact. And I had someone in oceanography or something that said, literally one drop of water into the ocean changes the chemical composition of the entire ocean. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Because if we're just one drop of water in the ocean and we have that ability to change the entire ocean, how much each one of us matters, right? And that we all have a purpose. Number 2 is just do it. Resilience is an active process. You know, I talk about that ability, and it needs focus, and the just do it, the DO stands for dispositional optimism. So this isn't denying things that are negative, but it's choosing to look for the usefulness in this and the lessons, and either be inspired to change or to look for what's good. And just like tragedy on the extreme end can highlight priorities, we can look for what's useful, and we need optimism right now. The news, and there's too many people being negative. So as leaders and entrepreneurs, we need to be bringing a dispositional optimism. And closely tied to that is tip number 3, which is embrace your sage and be a superhero. This is tied to Dr. Shirzad from Stanford's work on positive intelligence, and also Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset, and using your sage brain versus the saboteurs. We're going to have both, but leaning into one more than the other. And the HERO is actually an acronym, the HERO, for hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism. So as a leader or entrepreneur, we need to be building hope, efficacy in people in our team, resilience, and optimism, not just for ourselves, but for others. And number 4 is carry a mirror on the journey. So here we need to reflect on our experiences. And if you look back over the last year, think about those experiences. What's learned? What's good? It's real easy to, you know, see, you know, the challenges, but what's good? What's been learned? What's made us better, made you better? And then give yourself credit, because you're here, and hopefully you have a bit of a smile on your face today. And then embrace learning, because whether there's successes or setbacks, it's all learning. We don't want to dwell on successes because that becomes complacency. And we don't want to dwell on setbacks or failures, because then we're choosing to spiral down versus spiral up and out. Number 5 is head to toe, you got to know. And this is where you need to understand your physiology and ways to enhance your physical and mental well-being, and things like mindfulness or just getting out of the building. the whole self-isolation we've seen through the pandemic has meant that not only have we isolated from people, but it's kept us in buildings more, and we aren't getting out as much. We need to get fresh air and out in nature or semi-nature more. Number 6 is master your pit stop. And this is about recharging. And there's some references I give around this out of Harvard on building resilience and how to recharge. So building in breaks. And if we think of the word peace, the way it's spelled, P-E-A-C-E, just from, you know, there's other words where we could almost re-language that and call it peak. Like it could be pronounced peak, you know, based on phonetics. So there's something to be said for peace performance is really part of peak performance. And it's about working harder, not smarter. And if you think of F1 racers, one of the things that they need to do to win the race is they need pit stops. They need to strategically stop to do a few things. One is they need to refuel, and that's recharging. We need to recharge. You know, for me, the 2 weeks that I took off, you know, over the holiday break helped me recharge and come back after feeling a little weary and being able to come back. So there's the refueling. And then a lot of times, if we use the F1 racing analogy, they're replacing tires, they're fixing things on the vehicle and making it whole again. And we need that sense of feeling whole. And this is how, you know, the recharge and mastering the pit stop is critical. And we think that while taking time to not do productive things is less productive, and the science says no, that's, you know, just not the case. And there is a tipping point. Like if 2 hours a week of doing, you know, mindfulness things throughout your week, you know, have a 2.5x factor. I'm sure if you made that 20, that's, you know, maybe, you know, tipping the other way. Just like the old study on, you know, a glass of red wine a day is, you know, good for you. Well, that doesn't mean, well, if a glass is good, maybe a bottle's better, right? The other thing here is number 7, mind your P's and Q's. So the P's are performance and purpose. So make sure we're looking at what is the purpose to what you're doing and those that you're doing it for. And then the Q's are all those things like emotional intelligence, IQ, building your IQ, your relational quotient, RQ, collaborative quotient. And, you know, on the HOP website, we actually have a 10 Qs assessment that's free to take. So you can check that out if you'd like. Point number 8 is use GPS at the fork in the road. And this is, we all have mental maps of the world that help us make sense of things. And we know what a GPS is in navigation, and it helps us triangulate and get direction to move forward. So part of what we need to do is have coaching and feedback. If we think of a navigation system in GPS, it's giving us coaching and feedback on where to go. So finding, is there coaches you have or people you go to for feedback? And then I think the other part of this is that evidence-based approach to business and leadership. And whether that's as an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur in the hybrid world, and then, you know, the quality data and analysis and using secondary sources to back up your own experience and opinions. Tip number 9 is none of us walk on water unless it's frozen. So here, it's about excellence, not perfection, and embracing learning and growth. And with learning and growth means there's going to be mistakes along the road. So that's going to require forgiveness. And first, we have to forgive ourselves when we make those mistakes, as well as forgive others, especially when, you know, you're a leader, either as an entrepreneur, or a business leader. We need to allow people to grow and learn and support, while also helping correct and coach them upwards. And then the tip number 10 is, I call it mom's advice. And this is, you know, be grateful. And this, it's more than being grateful. And this was really ingrained in me by my mom, in that something you need to know is she was in a car accident, became a quadriplegic, so was paralyzed from her neck down. And for one of my first books, Epitaph Theory, when I was asking her definition of success, she said, being happy. And I said, okay, Mom, you know, for this book, like if people look at someone who's a quadriplegic, you know, being happy, that's going to make obvious sense, but what does that actually mean to you? And she says, Corey, you remember when I was in rehab and all the other people who are going through, you know, major change like I was, how when, you know, your dad, you and your sisters would come down, you know, I always had visitors and people around me. And remember how many people never had one visitor for the 6 months or a year that they're in rehab. Go, I'm just so grateful to have so many good people around me. And, you know, my definition of happiness and what makes me happy, there's really two primary things. She says, my two greatest moments are in the morning, before your dad leaves for work. He gives me a kiss on the forehead and says, I love you. And then at 5 o'clock at night, when that door opens, when he comes home, and she gets excited and smiles, and it always chokes me up a little bit to tell the story, because it says, then he comes in and he gives me that kiss, tells me he loves me again. And I think we need to, at a time like this, well, we're still standing, you know, and every day you're setting a personal best. When you wake up, you set a personal best, in that you have your personal best for days lived, right? We've just set another record today because we lived one more day, and tomorrow you're going to have a new personal best. So those are top 10 tips. The bonus is around the research out of Harvard on the need for networks to build relationships to help us rebound from setbacks. And, you know, having a network does a bunch of things. Obviously, there's the ability to delegate and shift some work to manage the surges. It can help us make sense of people in politics. It can help us with being able to self-advocate, bring back some of that confidence, help us see a path forward, even just empathy and, you know, being a lightning rod and hearing us out. They can make us laugh at stuff too. They'll help us, you know, sometimes it's real rough, but they'll give us perspective and, you know, look at the absurdity of some of the situation. And they also help with the purpose and meaning. So what I'd encourage you all to do before we go to Q&A is, for the action plan and commitment, is identify your top 3 sources of resilience that you want to strengthen in your life, and really focus on those for the next 6 months. And then the second thing is plan how you're going to expand and strengthen your relationships. Here, I would encourage you to use what I call a focus 5 strategy. So think of 5 people. If you focused on building those relationships, they would have the most impact on, you know, building not only your resilience, but towards your goals you have in business and life for yourself. And then the third one is, what do you commit to learning and developing this year and longer term? And then the last point is commit to relearning. And this is, leaning into some of those strengths and using it to solve problems. The fact you're here makes you a lot different than the majority of the population. You're investing in yourselves and in development and getting better. So lean into those strengths to help others and leverage that strength. I encourage you, embrace feedback and to get fresh perspectives. And then I think we need to relearn resilience and refocus on what's working and how we can move forward. And I've given an offer there. If you want to fill out that 10 Qs report, I'll set up a time, and we can have one-to-one to go through that with me. And I'd like to open it up to questions and answers and, check in on time too.
Thanks, Chloe. Thank you for the presentation. Very interesting. So, do you have any questions for the audience to get them involved, whether to use the chat button before they ask you their own question?
Yeah, I'd like to know what they're, after hearing, my rambling, what's, one thing that they're going to be working on and trying to strengthen this next year. Maybe putting that in chat. Let's see the answer in chat.
Okay. Like the future plan, yeah? Do you want to type the question, Corey, so that we see what the response of the participants are, please?
Yeah, okay.
So for everyone, you can all be using the chat room to interact with Corey presentation. So he's sending us a question now. So please feel free to contribute your thought. The question reads, what is one thing you are going to do to grow resilience?
Oh.
What a great question. So if you are sleeping before, we need to wake up now and start thinking. Thank you, Corey, for this. It is an inspiring question. Let me steal from not giving up. So disposition, optimism. Please feel free to use the chat room to type in your answer. What will be one thing to keep you going in terms of being resilient or being a resilient leader or a person or as an entrepreneur? Using some of the keywords of the presenter, I'm typing disposition, optimism, that is being optimistic. Then being active.
There was an interesting one in there in how to build resilience in a hostile environment. You know, if they could, you know, maybe give some context to that, I'd love to chat about that, and maybe there's others who can contribute
Yeah, sure.
an answer to that.
Please, everyone have your
Yeah.
responses, your answer, your contributions.
These are great answers. You know, it's certainly tougher in a hostile environment, and that, you know, I think of that old song from a kid, you know, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. And I think, you know, when we're in the darkness, we need to be the beacon of light, and it has to start with us. And with difficult people, difficult circumstances, we need to make the choice first and lead first in terms of the attitudes, behaviors, and things that we want to see changed, and stay with it long enough that enough other people will come on board. And, you know, with a hostile environment, it delays how long that will be. But the beauty of the hostile environment is if you take that approach, it's noticed and it's valued. There can be fear and there's repercussions, but if we think of those great world changers in history, right? They did it in spite of the fear and that, and this is where the purpose and meaningful comes in, where you're almost willing to die for the cause because it's bigger than us, right? So in the hostile environment, we need to almost step back and not let it break us down, because the environment is bigger than, and it's not just against us, because if it's an actual environment, you know, we can't take everything personally, but I do think we need to be that, you know, light and, you know, let it shine.
Yeah, I'm going to be reading out the comments in the chat room. We have so many interesting comments coming on. One from Dr. Jennifer, and I read, having a body system with other entrepreneurs so you can support one another. And there's another one, volunteering, helping the homeless. That's humanity. So we have another one from Tracy, lowering the value of turbulence and embracing it as a challenge and the journey that is temporary. Another interesting comment there. And she adds, love that query from Tracy.
Yeah. And on that point, Tracy, that's that, you know, taking a mirror on the journey. So that reflecting, giving yourself credit, and then embracing the learning. I love that.
Thanks very much, Corey. Now we're going to move on to the next speaker. Is that okay, Tracy, Corey, or do you have any other thing before I move on to the next speaker?
No, please, thank you for the time, everybody.
Okay, you're welcome. Thanks.